who were the abusers who wanted the spouse to, and the person who did the pain, no, wait, they're going on. And we seem to go, so if I'm driving in my car, it's not going to be very helpful. Or a couple would come in and you could hear them. I would hear a couple out in the waiting room.
Welcome to Rising Above Shadows of Abuse. Rasa, how do you personally define healing when someone is in the middle of a relational or marriage crisis then?
There's multiple layers to this, right? So one of the things that we have to make sure is that we're not giving people a way of excusing abuse. I always put that dealing with abuse is the number one place to start if that's going on. Making yourself safe. You can't enter into a healthy relationship if you feel like you are constantly under threat, right? If somebody is doing that. And the other side of that is I have had people who were the abusers who wanted the spouse to stay, and that's not okay either. They have to find what's activating them. So I want to set that aside, right? And we can talk about a little more of what happens. I believe that if you are in a relationship, there are going to be pain points to that relationship just by proximity. We're not going to agree on everything in life and how that's carried out. And so there are a couple of pieces. One is I call it everyday ordinary forgiveness, which is basically letting little things go instead of using those as proof that this person is against me and is only about themselves. We realize that all of our first reference points are ourselves. And then we have to look outside of that. And sometimes we're going to fail on that. If we've had a hard day, we might, say something we don't want to say it to somebody we love because of our own pain, because of our own difficulty. And so is a place that we have to go, okay, you know what? I'm not going to get caught up in every little, but the bigger things that happen, and they will happen. Part of the healing is for us to work through a forgiveness process. So I wrote a book on forgiveness because I found people were stuck on that. And forgiveness doesn't mean just letting the person off the hook. It doesn't mean that there are no consequences. It does mean I'm not going to be the one to carry that pain around in me, hoping that it will finally get to the other person. So I've watched people who every pain they take and it's like a rock and they stick it in their backpack and it weighs them down more and more. And the person who did the pain, no, wait, they're going on. And we seem to go, I'm going to carry this around until you recognize what you've done. And that doesn't work. So finding ways of actually finding forgiveness and letting go are important things, and not seeing it as I have to forgive, but that I get the option of forgiving. So I'm not carrying that around. There can still be consequences. That's one of the important things, is that just because you decide to forgive somebody doesn't mean that you let them back in to hurt you again, right? Those are boundaries that we can establish of what you won't let somebody do to you. So I'm talking about the damage done by holding on to those things, hoping that it will somehow affect the other person, instead of being clear with yourself that you'll find a better way forward.
Yeah, you're quite right. And another thing I just wanted to clarify here or add to what you just said is when it comes to forgiveness, take it easy. Do it at your own time, at your own pace, because people sometimes say, I forgive you, but instinctively within themselves, they know they haven't. So
Mhm.
it takes time. It's like a hurdle that you have to think and reflect about it. The pain, the unresolved issues, letting go, and then say, okay, I'm ready to
So
forgive this individual.
I had to write this book because people didn't understand that there is a process to do it. That's what's behind the book. And you're right, it's not a moment in time, it is a process. It starts with saying, I choose to forgive. You don't even have to say that to the person, though. That can be a personal choice. I choose to forgive. And that really is an important point. But then understanding other pieces of that puzzle so that you can put it back together in a way that allows you to move forward is the important part. So it is a process. Anybody who says that they have forgiven something just in an instant, it could not have been very hard to forgive that. I mean, it had to be something fairly small. The substantial things in our life, at least what I heard growing up was forgive and forget. And if you can forget it, you probably really didn't need to forgive it. The things that really are hard, that challenge us, we can still remember, but we understand things differently as we begin to move forward.
Thank you. So, why is it important, in your view, to move beyond blame when addressing relationship breakdowns?
A blame is always rear view mirror. So if I'm driving in my car, it's not going to be very helpful if I'm driving looking through that rear view mirror all the time, right? I'm just looking at what's happened. I need to be looking at where I want to go. And so blame, let's distinguish another word, is responsibility. How can I take responsibility? And so many times when I've said that to people, they're like, oh, you're blaming me. No, responsibility is a whole different thing. Responsibility. I have the ability of responding differently. And blame is not particularly helpful. So if I'm in a building and that building is on fire, the last thing I need to be doing is going, who caused this fire? That's blame.
Yeah.
The first thing I need to be doing is, how can I get myself and whoever else out safely? And that's moving away from the crisis by going, where do we want to go? There are times in the process of talking through that you may have to decide where to place responsibility in where things are, but where do you place responsibility and where you want to go? That, to me, is the predominant piece. Again, that doesn't let anybody off the hook. It just means that you're going somewhere. And responsibility is forward looking. It's looking out the windshield going, how do I follow the road?
So, it's like a roadmap.
So I don't believe, that's one of my concerns with how therapy has always been done, is the therapist never gave a roadmap. And so, yes, there is a roadmap to healing. There is a roadmap for a relationship, and it rarely has to do with getting focused on where you've been back there. I think it's easy to acknowledge that when a relationship is in trouble, the back there was not helpful, right? It didn't get you where you needed to. So the question is, how do we move forward to something better? What would serve us as a couple to have a loving, nurturing, connected, committed relationship?
Thank you. Absolutely amazing. I think I like the way you've defined that. So, how do you help couples shift from asking who is at fault to asking what needs healing? Because this is actually ties in neatly with what you've just said now.
Yeah. Again, one of the things that I think often happens in therapy is that they're trying to get somebody to side with them. You go in going, well, let me get the therapist to say, you're right, they're wrong. And two people doing that is not particularly productive. And so I am usually starting with, what do you want your relationship to be about? Not what do you not want because of what you have now, but what do you want it to be about? How can we create? So let's say I want to go on a trip. The first thing I'm going to do to go on that trip is to pick where I'm going to go. And until I pick where I'm going to go, there is nothing that's going to happen. There's no map that's going to help me. There's no GPS that's going to help me. There's nothing that's going to help me. I can have a car all packed up, but until I say, where do I want to go? And so, at least now, it used to be I'd have to pull out a map and track it. Now I can just pull out my phone and put that spot, and it will literally do a back engineering. Let's go from where you want to go to where you are. Let's find the route to get there. And that's what we're doing, to say, what do you want? I know what you've had, and we can talk about kind of what got you there, but to get focused on that rarely gets us to the destination you want. You just get stuck with where you've been. And I've talked with other therapists who had the same experience, where a couple would come in and you could hear them. I would hear a couple out in the waiting room who were laughing and talking together, and they come in my office and start telling me all the bad things that had happened over the last week. And I would just watch their moods crater. And it had nothing to do with what was going on right then. It had to do with where they took their mind and their communication, and where they didn't take it, which was in, how do we want to connect going forward? How do we want to find a better place? So that destination is crucial to have in order to root your way to it.
So invariably what you're saying is that there's damage when couples blame each other or shame each other, so to speak.
There is a limit to that. There are times when it is important to say, this is the dynamic that's been happening between you. So again, we're not talking about the abusive situations where somebody is abusing and the other person is at that mercy, right? That's not what we're talking about. Just general population. They find that they are in a dance together that has not been constructive. It's been destructive. And that dance, they can either choose to change. And sometimes you have to say, well, you notice how you had your feet going in that dance. That's why it was tangling you up. But then to say, so how do we want that dance to go? What are the pieces we want? And the blame is to say, you stepped on my foot. The way forward is to say, but how do we want the dance to go? Sure, you need to be aware that you want to not step on each other's feet and you not bump in each other. That is an awareness. It's just a lesser awareness. So in my perspective, maybe 20 to 30% of it matters on where you've been, but 70 to 80% of it is where do we want to go and what's gotten in our way of getting there so far.
So it takes a collaborative effort though when it comes to that.
It does to get to that final piece. So one of the things I've often said is one person can start the process, and so I've had people say, no, in order to save a marriage, both people have to be in there. It takes two to tango, as the saying is in many places. And my response is, you're already dancing. The tango has already begun. It's already in motion. And so two are already dancing. You just might not like the steps that are involved. So how do you change your side of that? At some point, in order to get to a healthy, strong relationship, absolutely both people have to be a part of that. But when you have disconnected, which is the root cause of most marital problems, when you've disconnected, one has to say, I don't like this, at least one. Sometimes it's both, but most often it's one person going, yeah, I'm not happy with where this is. I'm not saying they say that to the spouse, but recognizing that one person can say, I'm not happy with where this is. I want to start differently. I want to work on rebuilding the connection. Now, the thing is, we humans are desperate for connection. So when that connection starts coming our way, it's often a piece that draws us into connecting. That's how our instincts are. If somebody is connecting with me, I'm often going to connect with them. And that's the key that begins to unlock it.
Be safe and be positive. And don't forget to check out our social media handles. Thank you. Bye for now.